let's work on defining the gates for the roles for this currently authenticated user. So what we are going to do is define a middleware and register that middleware in the kernel, so which is going to execute through every request, and then we'll check for the authorization accordingly. So first, let's go ahead and define a new middleware. So artisan make middleware, and I'm going to name it register auth gates. So let's hit enter, and let's first register this middleware in our kernel, which is inside app http, and I want to register it inside web middleware because I want to run that middleware on every request. So here, let's call that register gates class. So that's done, and let's go to the middleware. Okay, let's remove everything from here and let's go to that middleware. So register auth gates. So here what we want to do is we are going to grab the user, and we can use the request user, or you can also use the auth user. It's going to give the same user for this case, and we also want to load the relationships. So in this case it's roles and then permissions, and load missing. So what this does is, in some cases where you are applying the eager loading constraints maybe in the user model itself, so in that case relationships could be loaded. So if the relationships are already loaded, then in that case this function is not going to do anything. It won't run any additional queries. But if the relationships are not loaded, then it is going to actually load when we call this function. So that's done, and we also need to check whether we have the authenticated user or not, because this request or this middleware is going to execute on every request. So even on non-authenticated requests, like in the login or other pages, this is going to execute. So we need to check whether we have the authenticated user or not. So if we have the user, then what we are going to do is, so we are going to loop over each of the roles, because our user can have multiple roles. So we need to take care of that. So user roles as role, and here what we are going to do is we are also going to grab the roles permissions of the roles. So we can do for, okay, maybe for each role permissions as, let's name it single permission. And what do we want to do here is we want to store the permission in an array. So we can do that like this: single permission. Okay, it's not name actually, but title, and this is equal to, okay, let's test this thing out. What do we get at this point? So let's dd permission, and this is a single n, not double n. So let's go ahead and reload, and we should see all of the permissions for that specific user. So currently authenticated user has all of these permissions, and what do we want to do after that? So I want to collect all of the permissions, and I'm gonna call in the unique method, because if we have multiple roles, then the permissions can overlap, or there can be duplicate permissions because of multiple roles. So we want to get the unique roles permissions from here, and then we want to map over, again not map over, but we want to go over each of the permission and then define a gate. So this is implemented already, so maybe we can make some changes in here, and I'll explain to you what this code does. So we have a, okay, maybe we should call this permissions, and permission looks good. Okay, so we are collecting the permissions and getting the unique items from that collection, and then to each of the permission what we are doing is we are defining the gate for this. And let's import this, and the type is facades gate. So we are defining the permission with this specific name. So here what's gonna happen is role create, role edit, role show. So all of these names are, so all of these are gonna be defined in new gate, and we do get the user, but what we can do is here we can directly pass in true, because since we are already grabbing the permissions using the user roles, so we don't have to worry about the condition in here. So we can directly define the gate, and not passing the second argument, this will give us an error, so we have to pass that. So if I try to save this and reload, then we'll get an error about the second argument. So as you can see, we have the two fewer arguments function to get defined, so we have to pass that closure, and we can pass in the default true because we are grabbing the user roles from the user model itself. So that should work now. So if we now go ahead and reload, then I have the debug bar installed, and okay, we don't have the gates in here, so there should be some issues probably. Okay, for some reason the gates are not been displayed in here, and maybe later when we implement the authorize and checks in the controller and front end, they would be displayed. And so this looks fine from my side, so maybe if we have some issues in the future, then we'll fix them accordingly. So we'll implement up to this for now, and in the next part we'll be working on implementing the authorize and checks on the backend side, so on the controllers, and in the further videos we'll implement that on the front end, so checking those checks on the blade side. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.